Welcome to the Set to Lead podcast, the online mentoring platform for emerging and current leaders. My name is Marianne Sambi, leadership coach and talent development expert, and I will be your host.
Hey, Sara. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're able to join us today. You are the cultural czar and managing director at Peppercom.
I am.
That sounds really, really regal.
It's a little bit of a spoof, but it's a real thing.
Yeah. So I thought I'd start there. If you could possibly share with our listeners who Peppercom is and what type of culture they nurture, since you're the cultural czar.
Absolutely. So Peppercom is an integrated marketing and communications firm. We've been around for about 22 years. We're headquartered in Manhattan. We have about 100 people in 3 offices, our headquarters and San Francisco and then London. And the culture is incredibly entrepreneurial. We like to say it's a place where you can build your own career and where we take the work for our clients very, very seriously, but we don't take ourselves seriously at all, hence my title. We do very challenging work, and we like to have fun while we do it. And that's a really important part and ethos of our culture, and you'll see that play out in lots of different ways.
Yeah, and so it does play out in a lot of different ways, and I understand Peppercom has a comedy program.
We do.
How does this comedy program contribute to your current culture and building productive employees?
So our comedy training program, it's a training program, and every employee at the company is trained on stand-up comedy. We started this, I think, 10 plus years ago. One of our CEOs likes to say that he was having his second or third midlife crisis and started to perform stand-up comedy on the side and realized that it was making him a much better business person. And so he brought that training into the organization. We have a professional comedian who acts as our chief comedy officer, and he leads the training at a local comedy club so people can really get the experience of being on stage. And we do this program as well as some additional comedy programs like improv and collaborative comedy for a couple of different reasons. We see a lot of benefits. One is just unbelievable bonding and the good time that you have. So we oftentimes will do this when people newly start the organization. So it's part of our onboarding program. So you participate with 10 or 12 other people who've recently joined the company, and it creates cohesion, and it also connects you to the brand of Peppercom and who we are as an organization. It's a badge of honor, we've all survived stand-up comedy. At the end of the day, our business is based on relationships, and comedy is a way to forge very solid relationships with each other, with our clients, and within our networks. I like this comment that our chief comedy officer says sometimes. He says, when you make someone laugh, they fall in love with you a little bit. And I really like that concept, because when you have relationships that have that strong bond, the work that you do together is better for it. So that's really important for us, is that we are able to do this really excellent work that's founded on this very solid foundation. And then it also just helps us become better storytellers and presenters, and both of those skills are very important in our business.
That's really unique. And I hate to ask this, but I just have to. I want to know, Sara, has anyone ever failed this program? Is there anyone out there that just can't become a comedian?
So you make a really interesting point, and that is something that people are really, really afraid of. Like, people join feeling excited about the stand-up comedy program, but also feeling really nervous. Like, what if I don't do a good job? And one of the things that the training helps everyone see and understand is that as long as you're being authentic and truthful and a little bit vulnerable, people will laugh. And it's not really about being funny. It's more about creating that connection. So we're not really training people to be comedians. We're training them to open up a little bit about themselves, and then they get that support and love back from the audience.
And what I like about it, because thank you for answering that, Sara, because I know I wish I had a funny bone. I don't think I do. I come from a family of comedians, in my opinion, but I've always asked myself, where did I really come from? Are these really my parents? Because they're hilarious. So, but you're right. It's not about being funny. It's about, I guess this program helps people build rapport with their teammates and their direct reports.
Absolutely. I welcome you to come to our next comedy training. You'll see that you have a funny bone.
Oh, I do. I'm going to hold you to that, Sara.
All right.
So thank you for sharing about PepperCom. This is an exciting culture. I've never heard of any other organization that has this type of comedy training program. How did you get here? What path got you into this current management role?
So I have actually been at PepperCom for 18 years, which is a lifetime in business today. You don't see that kind of longevity at an organization. I started at the company as an intern working in public relations. I received the job through my network, my graduate school network. I went to Syracuse University, and one of the women who worked at PepperCom had graduated from Newhouse as well, and she opened the door for me. And I came here really as a completion of my program and a trial of, do I really like public relations agency work? And 18 years later, the answer is yes, which is nice to know. But I've really picked up a ton of passion projects along the way. So I had my core career track in public relations, and I picked off pieces of things that I really cared about, like our training and development program, our performance approach, resourcing, staffing. And after a few years, I'm realizing all of these things have to do with people in the firm. And because we were a small firm at the time that I started, we had about 15 people, I was able to really dig into all of those different areas. And for about 10 years, I held a dual role, one in communications and one working internally with people at the company. And about 2.5, 3 years ago, I shifted fully into HR. And my job now is really to protect and nourish our culture and make sure that people here are having the best work experience possible. And I sit on our executive committee, and in kind of a really nice full circle way, I'm also the executive sponsor of our intern committee.
Wow. Congratulations on 18 years. Like you said, not too many people can say that for themselves. So a lot of folks out there have taken the route you took, which is, jump-starting their career via an internship. Mm-hmm. So obviously you knew how to stand out and get hired. What would you say was the best way, or what are some of the actions you took to build your brand as an intern?
Mm-hmm. So for me, a lot of it was about getting the door open a little bit so I can step into it. And that I was able to do that through my network and taking advantage of the network that I had available to me at that time. If I were going through that experience again now, 18, 19 years later, the possibilities for people entering the workforce now and coming into the workforce with a massive network is completely different. And one of the things I oftentimes will encourage people to do from high school on is build your network, make connections, show that you're interested in having these conversations, in learning about opportunities, and then taking those opportunities, and not being shy to ask for help when you need it. And that's something I think a lot of people entering the workforce really need to know and take advantage of, and it's part of building your brand. Once you have that opportunity, or even if you're blindly going into an organization and saying, hey, I would like to work here, I'd like to be an intern here, you really need to know the company. And when I say know the company, I really mean in two different ways, both the business of the organization, and as much as you can learn about the business, what are you seeing about the direction the company is going, the types of services that they're offering, how they've been changing over time, what their goals are, as much as you can tell those things from the outside. And then also its culture and knowing what would it be like to work there? What are the people who work there like? And is this an environment or experience that I feel like I would be comfortable in and that I can add to? Those are kind of the two ways that I would look at knowing the company. And then once you have that opportunity to be in there and having conversations with the company, really connecting your skills to what you learned. So how will you make this, using PepperCom as an example, an even better place to work. How would you maybe connect what we're doing with stand-up comedy to interests that you have, or to things you've done in the past, or to your perspective on that approach that we're taking? I have a lot of people who will reach out and comment about our stand-up comedy program, and I do notice that, and I do say, oh, they've done their homework, they understand what we're doing, but it oftentimes is in a very kind of like, oh, that looks like a lot of fun, I'd love to do stand-up comedy. I really am encouraging people to go deeper than that and to really make a connection. What is your point of view on that? Why does that matter? I think those kinds of things are ways that people will stand out and have more of an opportunity. And then the last piece of advice I'll give people is that some of our very best intern applications come to us in very non-traditional ways. So we have people who will send us iPhone videos, they'll post things on YouTube and share it with us, they'll do blog posts or websites or top 10 lists. And while it doesn't always work, when it's done well, it really helps candidates rise to the top and shows that they were really in it, as opposed to somebody who's maybe sending, a Swiss cheese or cookie cutter cover letter and maybe forgot to change the name of the company. There's just a difference in personalization and making us really realize that they would like to be here. They want to be here.
I would imagine that they should do that because you're a branding company, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So I would just assume that they would know that whatever tactics they use to get in the application process should be something that has a wow factor.
It helps. That's the work that we do. If you're going to do it for yourself, you're going to do it for your clients.
Of course. All right.
But we don't get as many of them as you would imagine. I mean, our intern program, we have 3 sessions per year, and we receive, 500, 800, 1,000 resumes per session. And I would say there's only a handful that really go that extra step.
That's shocking. That's shocking to hear.
Yeah.
That's really shocking. If you're a marketing expert, or, you went to school for marketing, or you want to work in the marketing industry, that you wouldn't think that you need to wow, and you need to differentiate yourself and brand yourself in a certain way.
Yes, it's, and that would apply for any business that you're going into, and just putting your thinking cap on a little bit of the skills that you're going to be using on the job. How do you use those same skills to stand out in the application process?
Do you think, Sara, for example, maybe you have a technical person that wants to work in the marketing field because they're traditionally not considered as creative folks at times? Maybe that's why they think they don't need to brand themselves?
It's a possibility. When it's not part of your everyday life, and people that are in branding or marketing, advertising, PR, it's part of what they're learning every day when they're going through the education process. And for a lot of those people, it's part of their natural style anyway. That's what attracted them to that business. So if you're not in that world or in that zone, I can absolutely 100% see that you maybe wouldn't have that inclination. Yeah. I would really, really challenge people to think about what they're trying to accomplish and then push themselves out of their comfort zone to put their best foot forward to accomplish that. Because you can really set yourself apart by showing that flexibility and your ability to modify based on circumstances.
Yeah, and that's what you were saying about knowing the business. That's what they're missing. If they understood the business and what the business is trying to do, they would automatically say, I need to brand myself for a branding company, right? They would connect the dots if they took a little bit more thought to think about what the business needs are and what the business does.
Absolutely. Look, when I was looking for an internship out of graduate school, I applied to a million different places. I did not think about, was this the right fit? What is the business doing? All of that. I didn't do that. And I see that that's what a lot of people are doing now. And I understand it because you're worried and this is a big step. It's a big change and you need a job and you need the money and you're going to cast a wide, wide net. But you I really believe that people would expend far less energy and have much more effective results if they narrowed the search, were really smart about their network and what introductions could be made for them, and then just really dug in deep on a handful. Maybe you have to go more than a handful because it is hard work to stand out, but bite off little pieces at a time, go in really deep, show that you want that, and that will help you stand out for sure.
Yeah. Sara, I'm sure when you first started as a direct hire, as an employee at Peppercom, I'm sure you made some mistakes. I'm sure you don't want to admit it, but I'm sure you did. What were some leadership mistakes you made earlier on, and how did you go about fixing them? If you don't mind sharing.
I don't mind at all, and I probably made way more than I remember. I'm not ashamed to admit that, and I'm probably still making some still. So I'll just get that out there right off the bat. And I think that's probably true of most people. This is being a manager, being a leader is not something that you just know inherently, and you make mistakes and things change, and you have to be willing to adapt and modify yourself in the same way I was talking about before, but in a different capacity. And that all starts with kind of self-awareness and a willingness to improve. So even separate from the mistakes, if you have those key abilities of just looking at yourself and saying, you know what, I'm not going to get it right all the time. Maybe I have to forgive myself that and just work on getting better. I think we'd all be better managers and leaders. But I will tell you some of my mistakes. For sure, one of my biggest mistakes was knowing how to communicate and effectively, which is ironic considering that my background is in communications, but it's, it's different when you're working with people and your coworkers and, direct reports. That type of communications is really different. And so I wasn't always aware. I didn't always recognize that the message I thought I was sending was not coming across the way I intended it to. And I definitely had a very black and white, like, I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off and let you know what's going on, without taking into consideration where that other person was. I wasn't necessarily asking them if they were ready for feedback. I wasn't creating the conditions where they would really hear that feedback. And there's a way to do that I really just wasn't in tune with. And I think I made quite a few mistakes there. Back at that point, there wasn't really a lot of talk about emotional intelligence. And there is so much more about that now. So there's a much higher level of awareness around how important those aspects are of communication. But it's a really, really important skill. And if it's not something that people are familiar with, or they don't have a good understanding of how they can build that capacity within themselves, I really, really encourage people to do some learning on their own about that. There's so much about it, and would really transform, I think, people's experience as a manager, as a leader.
Thank you for sharing that, Sara. Communication is huge. And all of us fall into situations where we're not our best at communicating. But the key is being aware of your shortcomings and trying to see if you can get better at it. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of times there are people who struggle with managing friends when they transition into management. I mean, you were best buddies before the promotion, and now you're in a situation where you've got to step up and help. Now you're managing your buddy. Yeah. Do you have any best practices on how to manage that type of dynamic?
So first, I just want to acknowledge that that struggle is real. That's a real complicated issue, especially when you work in an environment that's laid back and casual, and where there are a lot of friendships in the organization. That's the kind of company that I work in, and I see this happen quite frequently. We're also, I think, a little bit more.
Lucky you, Sara.
Yeah, I don't know. It's great to have friends at work. Knowing how to work with them is a different story sometimes. But I think because we do it a lot, we do have that situation a lot. People have learned how to adapt to that relatively quickly, which is great. But there are a couple of really good things for people to think about when they're in that situation. One, the relationship is going to change. And if you can be clear about that up front and not kind of trick yourself or your buddy into thinking like, oh, everything's going to be the same. Don't worry. That will hurt you in the long run. So it's best to really be intentional about it and to spend a little bit of time up front thinking about how that relationship needs to change and how you're going to help make that happen. And then have an upfront conversation with your friend or friends about that situation. There is a time and a place for everything, and just being very clear about what is that time and place and what they can be expecting of you as a manager now. And I also think that I would really, really encourage people to think about the things and the qualities that really make a great friend and how that can apply to being a really good manager, often even for those same people, but really for anybody. And if you think about it, most friends are very honest with each other. I hope most good friends are very honest with each other. And in a management capacity, that can translate into giving very clear and direct feedback that's based on caring and concern. And that would make a manager really stand out. Most friends have that deep, deep care and concern for each other. And who doesn't want a genuinely caring manager? So it's not really appropriate to be overly friendly or to show favoritism to your friends at all. But if you have an awareness that the attributes of a very good friend can make you a better manager, then you have some good stuff to work with. I think the only other thing I would caution people is that with that, you need to be really, really focused on equality and knowing that you may unintentionally favor your friends, and you need to pay attention to that and focus on that and think about how that would come across to other people. One of the things that I suggest that someone does as a new manager is really lay out what they want to be as a manager, what they want the experience of their direct reports to be working with them, and then make sure that that's equally applied across the board, whether you have a friendship with that person or not.
I think those are some great tips right there, Sara. You mentioned that you're part of a very laid-back organization, and I wonder, is it possible to be a lighthearted manager that's graduated from the comedy training program and get results? How do you recommend a new manager that's gone through your program, or any other professional out there that works in a culture similar to yours, negotiate being lighthearted with sharing candid feedback that gets taken seriously? Because sometimes honesty hurts. Yeah. And so if you know honesty hurts, you may not want to give candid feedback and just sort of kind of lean on the lightheartedness of things. Yeah. And sometimes we both know as a manager, you've got to make you got to have some difficult conversations.
Definitely. And really, I see this happen a lot where people feel like, oh, but I want to be nice. I don't want to hurt that person's feelings. That's not who we are. We're always laughing and joking. And I try to help people step into the shoes of that person for just a moment and see the situation from their eyes and know that you're doing a disservice to that person by not being upfront, by couching it in comedy, or by being too lighthearted about it. There's a time and a place when you're celebrating, when you're experiencing the joy or hardships of work and are kind of working on it as a team and trying to get through it together. Those are places where being lighthearted and having fun together are fine. That's all good and should happen. It makes the work experience so much better. But when you're coming to a situation where you need to deliver critical feedback or take a disciplinary approach or something like that, there's you have to step into your manager mindset and really take that objective, direct, clear stance, because that's what that person deserves. And you want that person to succeed. And I really believe that every manager truly wants that person to succeed, because that will help them to succeed, right? If it's based on nothing else, like we all want to go forward in success. And if we can help other people succeed, we also will. So I said this before about being upfront about what to expect if you're shifting from a friend to a manager. The same thing when you're thinking about being lighthearted versus being candid. You have to be very clear about what people are going to expect from working with you. when you're having fun and laughing, you're doing that at the right time. And you have to be genuine about that. When you need to give feedback, you have to set it up right. You can do that with your tone, with your words, by saying, I have to share very important information with you. Can you have a good conversation with me about what I'm hearing and seeing? Are you ready for the feedback that I have for you? These are all the kinds of things that you need to know. And if you have that foundation of fun and lightheartedness, you already have something to work with. You're not going in cold with negativity or attacking or anything like that, because you already have that foundational relationship in good shape.
Wow. I really enjoyed having this conversation with you today, Sara. I hope that the listeners enjoyed some of the key nuggets you shared with them as well. What is the best way for people to keep up with your work and connect with you moving forward?
Oh, thank you so much. I also wanted to thank you for asking me to do this. I really enjoyed the conversation and the opportunity, and I would love for people listening to connect with me. You can find me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I'm at SJ Whitty, WHITTY, and on LinkedIn it's Sara.Whitman. I'm pretty active on both. I post my thoughts on LinkedIn frequently. If people don't want to connect but just want a nugget here and there, they can get it that way. And I also contribute to Forbes.com as part of its HR council, and you can find some of my articles there as well.
Thanks, Sara.
Thank you so much.